Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum anastana. A couple days back, I had a conversation with a gentleman named Klaus J. Kuyk. He is a past master and secretary of the Germania Lodge number 46 in New Orleans. And we discussed the Red Lodge degrees that some of the lodges in New Orleans are conferring. And I know you're saying, wait, what? Red what? Yeah, that's right. That's what Points of Light Radio is here to do, is to raise the profile of such things within our fraternal circles. Many, even in the Masonic community, have never heard of the Red Degrees that are conferred within Freemasonry. So we're going to learn as we go along here, brothers and sisters. So let's move forward, shall we?
Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Mr. Kuyk, welcome to Points of Light Radio. Okay. Now, why don't you tell my listeners and viewers about yourself, your history with Freemasonry and so on?
Well, I'm the fourth generation in my family that I'm aware of that have documents proving that a member of the fraternity. And I've been a Mason now for probably around 55 or 56 years.
Wow.
I became a member of the craft when I finished law school in 1967. Have served as worshipful master of the Perfect Union Lodge number 1 of the York Rite, and also served as worshipful master of Etoile Polaire number 1 of the Scottish Rite, and was Grand Master of the state of Louisiana in 2006-2007.
Wow. Now tell us about the Germania Lodge number 46. I understand it used to be German speaking, so tell us a little bit about that, the evolution, shall we say, of that lodge.
Well, again, I'm not as familiar with that particular lodge as I am with the lodges that I'm a member of, but I can only tell you that, yes, there were several lodges in the city that spoke the German language and used the Ecclesia Rite for their meetings and their rituals.
Okay. Do you know if there's still any Germans left in it, or is it all entirely?
Well, they're Germans just like their Frenchmen left, but you don't have the concentration that they once had to support a lodge. The only lodge now that speaks the native tongue is Cervantes, which is a Spanish-speaking lodge.
Oh. Okay. Are there any lodges that speak Cajun down there?
It's a shame to say, although we have Cajun Masons down around Abbeville, they don't speak French. No, they use the English language. Oh. It's a shame that we lost it, but we did.
Yeah. Now, one of the unique things about some of the lodges in Louisiana is they use red craft degrees. Now, tell us about that. I understand there's 8 of these craft degrees that you operate in.
There's 10 lodges that form the 16th Masonic District, one of the districts out of the 20 districts in Louisiana. And yes, they use although they are York Rite bodies, they carry York Rite charters because they're authorized by virtue of the Grand Lodge, which is a York Rite Grand Lodge, because they stayed with the Grand Lodge in the conflicts that occurred around 1850. Because they stayed, they were allowed to use the ritual of their origin.
Okay. Now, what are the qualifications for membership in the Red Lodge? Are they the same as they would be in, shall we say, any of the traditional lodges?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. Are there any plans, shall we say, to expand the conferral of these red craft degrees?
When you say expand the conferral of these Red Craft degrees,
to other lodges and stuff, other jurisdictions.
well, within the 10 lodges, they're all conferred now. And then, of course, once you complete the craft lodge, and you go to the consistory. The consistory then takes over from the 4th degree to the 33rd degree.
Okay. Now, so you say there's what would you say makes them unique, shall we say, from your traditional craft lodges with their 3 degrees? What would you say? Are they more based around?
Well, what makes them uniquely different is the fact that Ecclesia Masonry, Scottish Rite Masonry, is really the developmental aspect of Masonry emanating from France, whereas the York Rite bodies emanate out of primarily, I would say, England, but there were more military lodges coming out of Scotland and Ireland, and so more of the lodges here would bear that identity. But with respect to your question, they basically, New Orleans or Louisiana was a French colony, much like Quebec is in Canada. And because of that, it was a port of entry. So you had a multitude of different cultures existing in the city. So there was a real tug to hold on to the origin or the craft that they were aware of when they came here. Because remember, what was going on in the late 1700s in the islands, there was basically, I say it's civil conflict, but it was a uprising by the slave population. And that occurred, a lot of the Caucasian or the Creole population came to the French cities, and New Orleans was the most logical choice for them to come, where they would feel totally welcome, totally embraced by the language, and totally embraced by its Freemasonry.
Okay. And is it the same amount of time, shall we say, between the qualifications for moving between the different degrees? Is it the same, the memory work and so on that goes with Freemasonry?
No. In York Rite Masonry, you've got the 3 craft degrees, which are fundamental to Freemasonry. But in the York Rite, you have the chapter council and the commandery, whereas in the Scottish Rite, what happens is from the 4th degree to the 33rd degree, there's degrees for each one of those. There's debate amongst the academics as to whether or not there are anything additional is added to it, because one of the reasons there was conflict in the early days was because the Ecclesia Masonry or the French Masonry was claiming that they were a superior form of Masonry. That was one argument. The other argument was, well, there was nothing more than the principles which are set forth in the 3 fundamental craft degrees in any of the rites. But you see what happens is, and the unique thing that's different about the French is that they embraced a concept of accumulation of rites. I had the honor of speaking at the French Grand Lodge back in 2006, 2007, and within that body there were 7 different rites. You don't find that anywhere in the United States, with the exception of Louisiana. And that, as I said, is what has developed over a period of time. Because remember, when in the early 1800s, when Louisiana comes back to and is purchased by the United States, it's still a French colony. It's been under the Spanish since the Treaty of Fontainebleau in 1763. It was under the authority of the Spanish, but then in 1800, of course, Napoleon gets it back, and then he doesn't want the British to get it. So what he does, he then sells it to the Americans, and so you have to realize what's going on during that time from a cultural standpoint. So English Masonry fights to get a foothold in Louisiana. French Masonry is here from the year 1752, the basic craft degrees. 1756, it's granted the Rite of Perfection, which at that time was only a 14-degree compendium of rites. And but that goes on in Louisiana until about 1850, when there's a real conflict between the two rites based over the one issue that I've told you, that there was some Frenchman that said that Scottish Rite Masonry was a superior form of Masonry. So what happens is the Grand Master said there will only be one rite practiced in Louisiana, and that's going to be the York Rite. And as I said, the lodges that stayed loyal to the Grand Lodge were allowed to, as long as they kept a York Rite charter, they could use the ritual of their origin, which most of them were the Scottish Rite rituals.
Okay. Now, are the, shall we say, the offices, shall we say, the same within, in the lodge setup, the same within a Red Craft Lodge as they would be in a regular craft lodge?
In a York Rite Lodge, you would have lesser officers. In the Scottish Rite Lodge, you would have more officers seated on the floor. There's a Grand Hospitalier, an inner guard, master expert. These officers you would not find in a York Rite body, no.
Okay. Now, do you find that, like they say, you learn a lot about yourself as you go through the degree system within Freemasonry? Now, what did you learn about yourself when going through your Red Craft degrees?
I think the most unique thing about the Red Craft, you call them Red Degrees, and as I said, as I told you, we're not a Red Lodge. A Red Lodge is a lodge that functions under a Grand Orient as opposed to a Grand Lodge. Mm-hmm. But I would think the most unique thing about a Red Lodge and what you learn as an individual going through a Red Lodge or Red Degrees is the idea of self-reflection. And that's the one concept that I believe, for me it was, when I took that degree, was most revealing. They basically don't accept the fact that you would like just to be a Mason. They ask you question you as to why you want to be a Mason. What's your real reason for becoming a Mason? You know, if it's a self-centered, selfish reason, then of course that's not what the answer they're looking for. But anyway, that to me that was the most striking thing about the Scottish Rite ritual. That was such a major point that was stressed in that compendium of degrees.
Before we go any further, I want to draw your attention to the PayPal link in the details section of this segment. Please click on that, make a voluntary donation to Points of Light Radio. I do not have a sponsor, so everything you see here on Points of Light Radio is not sponsor driven. So make that donation. We will use that to move the podcast forward. God bless you. Let's keep learning, shall we? Yeah. And what drew you? I know you told me about your family history with it, but what really drew you to Freemasonry?
I would think wanting to emulate the lives of the men that were in the social circle that my family was involved with. My dad was a World War II Navy pilot, and that was one of the social circles that we traveled in, and the other was a circle of Freemasons. And I always was totally impressed as a young boy how these men were different. They were just obviously different. They were good men. The way in which they looked at life, the way in which they handled stress, the way in which they handled problems, the unselfish nature of these men, and you couldn't help it just want to emulate. You know, like I said, my dad, my granddad, my great-granddad, and all my great-uncles and uncles. And so I had some wonderful examples in my life, and I certainly wanted to do that. And so my dad encouraged me to make sure I finished my education before I got involved. I finished law school in '67, and then asked to become a member. Yeah, that's the way it was.
And what has Freemasonry done for you?
What has Freemasonry done for me? I think it's helped me to align myself with men that I can call on at any time in times of need that I would have a problem. Thank the good Lord, I haven't had many problems in my life, but I know that factor exists. It's a organization of honor. I was totally impressed when I, as I said, I spoke in France, in Paris, and all of the countries, and that was the World Conference of Grand Masters, and they came from all over the world, and to sit down with a man that's a complete stranger, and because you know that he stands for the same principles that you stand for, and he invites you to his country, he invites you to his home, as if you've known him all your life. That to me just was a really impressive thing, and I'm still impressed by it. And I have friends all over the world because of it. Went to Ireland 2 days ago and visited one of their provincial Grand Lodges, and it was just like I've known these men all my life, and I've just met these men, but I know that they stood for the same principles that I stood for, and became Freemasons for the same reason that I did.
Well, sir, I appreciate your time today. All the best to you, your lodge, and your organization.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to sit here and discuss it with you.
That was our new friend, Plus J. Kike, brothers and sisters, discussing the Red Lodge degrees. What do you think? This is one aspect of Freemasonry that I've discovered. It's kind of like an onion, right? As you peel layers off, you find more layers, and branches, rites, appendant bodies, and so on, right? There's more to it than appears on the surface. I really don't know where to go with this particular segment, so, right, I'd love to have this gentleman back here on Points of Light Radio, and I'd love to, of course, to study the Red Lodge more here on the podcast. And I think I'll just leave it at that and allow you, the listener and viewer, to decide how you feel about this. This was really, really fascinating. This is another part of Freemasonry that I don't know about you, but I did not know it existed before. And that's really what Points of Light Radio is here to do, right? Is to kind of raise that profile, raise your awareness of what else is out there when it comes to these different fraternal orders. But like I said, I'm just going to leave it there. As always, I want to draw your attention to the PayPal link in the details section of this segment. You can hit on that PayPal link, make a voluntary donation of Points of Light Radio. We will use that to move the podcast forward. You can also follow Points of Light Radio on Facebook at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. The podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also welcome your comments and input. And I really want to see, this is another one of those segments where I really want to see some comments and input on how you feel about this organization. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. My Bluesky handle is at polightRadio.bsky.social. You can see the link to my Spotify channel, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, until we meet again, just step into the light.